everyone, it's Katrina. Beneath the frozen landscapes of our planet, there is a hidden world of extraordinary creatures. From a skinless Scottish centaur to the Yeti discovered in the Himalayas, here are some of the strangest creatures from the ice. Organism 46b. Under Antarctica's miles of ice, you will find around 400 subglacial lakes. The largest of these is Lake Vostok, and it may be home to a monster. The lake has been covered in ice for the last 15 million years. According to urban legend, Russian scientists were drilling into the lake in 2012 and found something so shocking and so terrifying that records were sealed and hidden from the public. What did they find? The Russians call it Organism 46b. The story begins in 1957 when Soviet scientists established Vostok Station in Antarctica. In 1974, they realized they had built their base on top of a hidden body of water deep beneath the ice. The existence of the lake was also confirmed by British scientists. The Soviets began drilling into the ice in an attempt to find out what exactly could be hiding below after millions of years. It took them 30 years to break into the subglacial lake. In 2012, they finally got in and revealed a world lost in time. What emerged was an enormous 33-foot-long creature equipped with 14 tentacles that was extremely toxic. The monster slithered up and attacked the scientists. It was agile, angry, and very intelligent. Fueling this scary story was Dr. Anton Padalka, who was supposedly part of the first scientific expedition to investigate the lake. When they lowered the divers through the vertical shaft and into the water, they soon wished they hadn't. Padalka reportedly said the men who descended into the lake were killed by the horrific monster. The beast released its venom, paralyzing the men who were exposed to it, and then it gobbled them up. Padalka said the monster used its tentacles to tear the scientists limb from limb. Then it hunted down the survivors after escaping from its frozen lake prison. Almost all the team was massacred before they finally got the creature secured into a tank. Russian officials seized the tank holding the creature, and that was the last anyone ever saw of it, whatever it was. While this story has been circulating for years, it turns out that it was written by science fiction author C. Michael Forsyth. But the story is being kept alive by internet message boards and monster hunters. It appears there could still be some truth to this tale. Rumor is that the fictional story could be part of a cover-up. Organism 46b could have been from another world, a bizarre tentacled alien trapped beneath the Antarctic ice. There might be more of them down there. It could be that the governments of the world have kept this scientific disaster a secret because they don't want the public to know that there are toxic aliens trapped in Antarctica. There are all kinds of theories. Whatever the case, Lake Vostok is very real, harboring a unique ecosystem that has been isolated for millions of years under the ice. Who left these footprints in Alaska? Something strange left a series of inexplicable footprints in a park in Alaska, and people demand answers. The National Park Service did come up with an explanation, but not everyone is accepting it. Some believe the footprints belong to none other than Bigfoot. These footprints have become the latest in the Bigfoot phenomenon. Is this proof that a prehistoric monkey man is living in the icy wilderness of Alaska? Let's take a closer look at the prints. The mysterious tracks were recently photographed on a relatively popular trail in Alaska's Denali National Park and Preserve. Although I say popular, it's not that popular. It is a trail that people do visit, but make no mistake, it's in the middle of absolutely nowhere. The prints are clearly not human. Each one only has 4 toes and no big toe. What makes them extra strange is that the prints were left on top of the ice by something walking on 2 legs. This wasn't a wolf or a bear or a deer or anything of the sort. It was something huge, walking upright just like a human. Denali is home to about 6 million acres of pure wild terrain. That's million with a capital M. The park is cut in half by a single road winding through the snowy landscape. Its border is about 230 miles north from the main city of Anchorage, so it's not exactly easy to get to. Denali Park rangers shared photographs of the strange footprints on Facebook. Rangers said that the tracks were left by a wolf, but they were morphed by nature beyond recognition. The tracks must have been pushed or blown around by the wind. At least, that's what the park ranger said. The wind blew the loose snow away from the wolf tracks, making the prints appear far larger than they really were. But people are asking, how do they explain the fact that whatever left the tracks was clearly walking on 2 feet? After all, wolves have 4 legs. Park rangers had yet another clever explanation. They said that wolves are so efficient when they walk that they put their hind foot directly in the track of their front foot. It sounds suspicious, but it's true. So maybe there is no mystery. Maybe everyone was wrong, and the prints are indeed from a wolf. Or maybe not. Not everyone is buying the ranger's explanation. Some still believe the tracks were left behind by a snowy version of Bigfoot. Sasquatch, Alaska Edition. There was another recent incident you might not have heard about. In 2019, reports arrived from Nepal that soldiers in the Indian Army found footprints belonging to a similar creature. The Himalayan Bigfoot, or the Yeti, nearly ran into the soldiers. In a bit, you're going to see how a single footprint led one man on the chase of his life through the Himalayas in search of the Yeti, the horse monster. The Nukkalavi, a monstrous aberration of nature, is said to haunt the Scottish coast. Its appearance is a harbinger of doom. You would think that a horse monster wouldn't be that scary, but the Nukkalavi is described as a horse demon. Although, personally, it seems more like an inside-out centaur. It is the nastiest and ugliest of all the mythological creatures in Scotland. Its breath is said to be so toxic that it can wilt entire crops and make livestock sick just from breathing on them. There are very few eyewitness accounts of anyone encountering the Nukkalavi, likely because it is so scary they would probably instantly die. The demonic being is so evil and horrifying that it's confined underwater by a mythical being known as the Mither of the Sea, a deity of Mother Nature during summer. But in the autumn, she had to fight against another deity called Terran, who would unleash the Nukkalavi until the next season. It's only in the winter that the Nukkalavi escapes and terrorizes the Scottish Highlands. A man called Tammy apparently had an encounter with the Nukkalavi. He described this spirit as a great horse with flappers like fins around his legs, mouth as wide as a whale that shot out steaming breath, and had only one eye. Growing from its back was the torso of a man with really long arms and no skin. Folklorist Trail Dennison was a resident of the Orkney Islands who transcribed the ancient folklore of Scotland in the 19th century. He traveled about asking people about their experiences and stories of mythological creatures. From other sightings and tales, he gathered a pretty graphic description that was a little different than Tammy's. The centaur demon looked like it had been turned inside out. Its black blood pumped through yellow veins that stuck to the pulsating masses of powerful muscle all over the monster's body. It looked like a thing risen from hell. The whole monster looked like raw flesh with no skin. But in this case, there were no flippers, and the head on the horse's back was like a man's, only 10 times larger. This is the monster that terrified people in Scotland during the snowy winter. I don't think there's anyone alive who could see this thing galloping at them in a blizzard and not feel terror. But what was it? Was it real? Did Tammy really see the creature almost 200 years ago, or had he drunk a little too much whiskey? In ancient times, people in the Orkney Islands did believe in the Nukkalavi. They blamed the creature for prolonged periods of drought and poor harvests. This creature would spread disease and decay. Whenever there was a problem in the Scottish Islands, Nukkalavi was to blame. As for where the stories came from, since this is Origins Explained, the answer to that likely lies in the East. Scottish lore was strongly influenced by Scandinavian mythology, with some dashes of Celtic myth added in for good measure. Many experts in Scottish folklore think the Nukkalavi was inspired by the Celtic water horse. Even earlier than that, the Celtic water horse may have been based on the hippocampus. The hippocampus is an even older horse-shaped sea monster from Phoenician and Etruscan legends. Almost every ancient culture had a deadly horse in their mythology. It's worth mentioning the Nikur as well. The Nikur is the Icelandic version of the water horse. It's a shape-shifting watery horse demon that lures people into icy bodies of water and drowns them. When you're alone in the Icelandic wilderness and hear the ice cracking, Folks say that's the sound of Nicor neighing for its next victim. And now for a quick break because it's shout-out time! I want to give a big thank you to Melissa Mohammed and Nikki B for supporting this channel. We wouldn't be here without you. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos like this. The wind weasel of Japan. Have you ever felt a wind so cold it feels like it cuts through your clothing and chills you to the bone? In Japan, this icy mountain wind gave rise to the stories of the Kama Itachi, a flying weasel with long claws that will cut you like a knife. The Acacia Mountains of Japan, also known as the Southern Alps, are very high and very cold. There are 7 active glaciers, and it gets so cold that many places are off limits for many months out of the year. This isolated place is perfect for monsters that thrive in the cold, ready to pounce on the few brave enough to come through. The wind monsters are called Kama Itachi, or sickle weasels in English. They look like normal weasels, only their claws are as strong as steel and as sharp as deadly razors. They bark like dogs and have spiky fur like a porcupine. The Kama Itachi comes in the winter wind and wreaks havoc. Legend has it they travel in packs of 3s and attack with impossible speed, but they don't aim to kill. The Kama Itachi's attack strategy is really bizarre. One of the weasels knocks its victim to the ground, the second one attacks with its sharp claws, and the third one heals the victim. The victim is healed with a magical salve so quickly that when they get up off the ground, they don't even realize they were attacked. They have a few scratches, but nothing to suggest they were ambushed by weasels. The stories vary from place to place. Sometimes the weasels feed on blood and leave you weak. Others believe that these weasels will leave their victims with a dangerous fever. Sometimes they attack with no purpose. They just come whenever the cold wind blows. If you fall down and skin your knee, you could say you were attacked by the Kama Itachi. If you trip and fall but no blood comes out, you could say the same thing. Any kind of inexplicable injury from the icy elements was blamed on what were essentially ghost weasels that only lived in the snow. Paul Bunyan's blue ox. Have you ever seen a blue ox before? Most people haven't, but then again, Paul Bunyan wasn't most people. Paul Bunyan is a legendary lumberjack in American folklore. He is known for his immense size and strength, and his exploits often involve supernatural feats. He is often accompanied by his giant blue ox named Babe. On a particularly cold winter night, so cold that the geese flew backward and the fish moved south, it became so cold that even the snow turned blue. It was so cold that when people talked, their words froze in the air. They had to wait until morning for their words to thaw and people to hear what they'd been trying to say. It was in the midst of this horrible winter that Paul Bunyan decided to go out for a walk in the woods because why not? Paul was knee-deep in the snow when he heard a strange sound. He brushed the snow away and saw a small baby ox looking up at him. The ox was blue from its snout to its tail. It was too short to see over the snowdrifts, and it snorted at Paul in frustration. Paul laughed at the spunky animal and picked up the baby ox and took it home. Paul assumed the ox would return to its normal color once it sat by the fire for a little while. The little ox dried out, but it remained completely blue. Paul named him Babe the Blue Ox. Like most of Paul's creatures that he raised, Babe grew to be a behemoth. Babe was supposedly 42 axe handles tall. It took a murder of crows 24 hours to fly from one horn to the other. When Babe was itchy and rubbed himself against a tree, the tree fell over. And when he was hungry, Babe would eat 30 bales of hay in a single sitting. Was there ever really a giant blue ox? Perhaps there was a species of blue ox during pioneer days and people forgot about them. Scientists aren't sure, but to be fair, they aren't even sure that Paul Bunyan was a real person. Paul Bunyan was supposedly born in Bangor, Maine. When he was a grown man, a single thrust of his axe created the Grand Canyon. Babe the Blue Ox was so huge that his footprints filled with water and became the 10,000 lakes of Minnesota. Paul Bunyan was the Chuck Norris of the 19th century. None of the stories about him sound true, but that might be on purpose. Historians have traced the Paul Bunyan tales to a man named Fabien Fournier. Fabien was an actual lumberjack. He was a French-Canadian who worked on a logging crew in Michigan after the end of the Civil War. He was also a giant among men, standing 6 feet tall. I know that's not much by today's standards, but keep in mind that men in 1875 were often below 5 feet tall. Fabian was such a giant that his friends and coworkers started making up tall tales about him. They said things like he had 2 complete sets of teeth, which he used to bite off wooden rail spikes. In 1875, he was murdered in Bay City, Michigan. His killer's trial likely fueled the already outrageous tales being told about Fabian. From there, things just kind of spiraled. The first Paul Bunyan story was printed 30 years later, in 1906, in Michigan. Paul became the all-American lumberjack, even though the legend was likely based on a French Canadian. As for his huge blue ox, Babe was likely just another tall tale of a baby ox that was rescued from the snow. The man who found the Yeti. There have been hundreds of Yeti sightings over the years. Also called the Abominable Snowman, it is Bigfoot's distant cousin who lives high up in the Himalayas. It's said to live in the snow-covered regions of Nepal and Tibet. But there is one very specific sighting that I want to tell you about. The sighting comes from a man who searched for the Yeti for 60 long years, and apparently found it. His name is Daniel Taylor, but his story starts with another man named Eric Shipton. Shipton was a British explorer who stumbled upon what he described as the greatest wilderness on the planet. It was in 1951 when he went searching for an alternative route to the top of Mount Everest. As Eric was climbing along, he found a footprint. The footprint was human, but also not quite human. It was too big to be the footprint of a man, and it was also a footprint, not a shoe print. But nobody is climbing the icy Himalayas in their bare feet. When Eric asked a Sherpa about it, they replied with one word: Yeti. In the Sherpa language, Yeti means wild man. Long before European mountaineers were trying to reach the top of Everest, the indigenous people in the Himalayas told stories about the wild men living deep in the cold wilderness. The footprint was discovered on the Menlong Glacier, which isn't technically on Mount Everest. It's a little bit to the west, near the border of Nepal and Tibet. When Eric Shipton went home with the photograph of the print, nobody doubted its authenticity. Eric didn't go into the mountains to search for monsters. He was trying to climb a mountain. He had no realistic motive for creating a hoax. Daniel Taylor has been searching for proof of the Yeti since he was a child. At the center of his search has always been Eric Shipton's photograph of the mysterious footprint. The print itself looked human, but had another digit sticking out like a primate. Not to mention it's enormous, 13 inches long. I'm sure there are some people with 13-inch long feet, but it's definitely not the norm. Daniel Taylor began his journeys into the Himalayas in the 1960s. He started out by driving a VW bus from Europe all the way to Kathmandu in Nepal. He funded his adventure by selling seats on the bus to traveling hippies. All the while, Daniel was looking for the Yeti. Later in life, Daniel worked for the U.S. Agency for International Development. He returned periodically to the Himalayas as a consultant, and in the 1980s he searched for the Yeti again with his wife and child. He even knew the king of Nepal personally. Daniel asked the king if he could have permission to examine bear footprints at the Royal Zoo, and the king said yes. Daniel wanted to study the footprints of the Himalayan tree bear because he had a sneaking suspicion that something strange was going on. Daniel matched plaster casts of bear footprints with Eric Shipton's photograph of the Yeti's footprint. It turned out the Yeti Shipton had discovered was a bear, perhaps a new species. After spending years looking for the Yeti, Daniel actually found it. It just wasn't the creature that he had been expecting. The Yeti does exist, but it isn't a humanoid primate. At least not this particular Yeti. The one that left its footprint in the snow in 1951 was a bear probably in search of something to eat. The gnomes that ski in the Alps. The skiing gnomes from the Alps are weirder than you can imagine. They're like bizarre snowy hobbits that ski down the slopes on their huge hairy feet. They are called barbegazi, which comes from an ancient French word that means frozen beards. The legend goes that the barbegazi are still living in the Swiss and French Alps today. They are sheltered from the outside world, hiding inside a deep network of caves and tunnels. The entrances are concealed from human eyes. Only the snowy gnomes can enter their own subterranean cities. They've supposedly been living in the Alps since time immemorial. And boy, do they love the snow! The Barbigazi can't get enough of that chilly weather. The gnomes hibernate in the summer, only coming out from their tunnels once it begins to freeze outside. They don't worry about avalanches because the Barbigazi can dig themselves out, no problem. If they ever need to hide, they can rapidly bury themselves a few feet in the snow and then tunnel away like moles. There have been eyewitnesses who claim they saw skiing gnomes at the tops of mountains in the Alps. There have been sightings. However, as per usual in these cases, there are no pictures and there is no physical evidence. Scientists won't entertain the idea of snowy gnomes. What you might find interesting is the fact that there have never been sightings recorded in the summer, when temperatures are above zero. There's also never been a sighting of the Barbigazi below the tree line. Mountaineers have only seen them in the winter near the mountain peaks, the very place they are said to live, and the only season they are said to appear. So, could these gnomes be real? Let me know in the comments. The Ningen. The Ningen is a humanoid creature that lives in the icy waters near Antarctica. Some say the Ningen was invented by Japanese internet users, but many stories over the years have come from Japanese fishing vessels that first began to report sightings of the creature in the Southern Ocean. The pale monstrosity was said to be 100 feet long. The Ningen is a monster of whale-like proportions. Some describe it as an actual whale, only with really long white arms and a human head. Others describe it as a very large mermaid that hides underwater, but sometimes it has legs. The Ningen has been described as a bizarre terrestrial creature that lives in Antarctica. It is so pale it's blue, and it consists of nothing more than a large head on a pair of legs. The terrestrial Ningen has a large slitted mouth and massively gaping eyes. It scuttles around in Antarctica and is extremely elusive. The difference in description sounds like two completely different creatures, one of them being a marine monster and the other being some sort of Antarctic gremlin. Nobody knew this creature existed until around 2007. A post appeared on a Japanese forum saying that members of a whaling ship saw the Ningen off the coast of Antarctica. The whalers initially thought that they had found a submarine, but when the crew took a closer look, the submarine looked back at them. Then it disappeared into the waves. It's rumored that the ship's crew captured detailed photographic and video evidence of the encounter, but this material has mysteriously vanished. Some speculate that government agencies may have prevented its release. There have been a few other sightings. People have seen strange shapes on Google Earth, which they identified as the Ningen, but most skeptics dismiss these sightings as being nothing but icebergs that look like sea monsters, and the Ningen is just an urban legend. What do you think? The Chenu. It's time to meet one of the most frightening creatures from the ice. In Algonquin folklore, the Chenu are a type of cannibalistic monster that were once human but were corrupted by dark magic. Calling it one of the most frightening of the Algonquin's traditional monsters is saying a lot, because Algonquin folklore is scary. It is full of the most terrifying abominations, demons, cannibals, and spirits in Native American mythology. The Algonquin were the ones who came up with the myth of the Wendigo, assuming the Wendigo is a myth and not a real spirit stalking the remote forests. The Chenu are usually larger than a human, and their hunger makes them grow even bigger. They have sharp fangs, and their lips are usually chewed off. Chenu are forced to live in the snow because their bodies become very hot. Giant creatures are a recurring theme in Algonquin mythology. Even the Wendigo is typically depicted as a giant, though not a big, strong giant. The Wendigo is associated with the cold, deep winter, famine, and starvation. It was said that whenever a Wendigo cannibalized somebody, it would grow in proportion to whomever it just ate. In this way, it would never be full. The Wendigo always had a human-sized hunger in its belly. Even though the Wendigo kept growing and growing, it remained thin, emaciated, and grotesquely bony. The Algonquin also claimed that the Wendigo gave off a horrible stench of decay and corruption. Chenu are fairly similar to Wendigo, but they do have some major differences. For example, they didn't start out as supernatural monsters. Chenu began as normal humans, but are corrupted by dark magic. The dark magic drives them insane, causing them to chew off their own lips and then have a hunger for human flesh. They also grow fangs like vampires. According to the legend, the Chenu's icy breath can freeze a person solid in an instant. Its chilling touch can sap a person's warmth and vitality, leaving them helpless against the elements. Those who fall victim to the Chenu's allure are said to be doomed to a frozen eternity, trapped within the creature's icy domain. To avoid the Chenu's wrath, Cree people would take great care to stay warm and prepared for the harsh winter conditions. They would offer prayers to the spirits of the land, seeking protection from the evil creature. It was believed that the Chenu was most powerful during the coldest months of the year, when the land was blanketed in snow. The legend of the Chenu serves as a cautionary tale, reminding people of the dangers of the winter wilderness. Is the monster real? Or is the monster within us? The insatiable snow critter of Canada. Far from the Japanese Alps and the Great Lakes region of Canada, there is a weasel-like animal known as the snow wasset. It's a fearsome predator that's real enough it has a scientific name, Mustelinopsis subitivorax. Problem is that nobody can prove the animal exists. Little is known about the behavior of the snow wasset, especially since it may not be real. It's supposed to be a migratory animal, spending its winters hunting around the Hudson Bay. It spends its summers as far north as it can, in places like Labrador and the Barren Grounds. It only likes to be where the air is cold. Unlike bears that hibernate in the winter, the snow wasset hibernates in the summer and doesn't wake up until the snow starts to fall. In the summertime, the wasset has rudimentary legs, which allow it to pull itself through the shade to places where it can sleep in peace. After the first snowstorm of the year, it sheds its legs like a lizard sheds its skin and moves around like a snake. Woodsmen have been telling tales for years about creatures that are sucked into the snow by hungry wassets. These bizarre, ferret-like weasel monsters hunt like the giant worms from Dune, popping out to grab you, only they are fuzzy and cold. Apparently, they have an enormous appetite. The wasset is 4 times as large as a wolverine, but 40 times more active. This means that it must eat an enormous amount of forest critters to stay alive. You might be doubting the authenticity of the snow wasset right about now. I admit it sounds like it came from a Dr. Seuss book. But there has been one specimen allegedly examined by a couple of pioneers. European settlers on James Bay came across a Native American. He had a very peculiar canoe with him. It was made from a single hide, stretched across the whole hull. This was no ordinary animal hide. Upon closer inspection, the Europeans realized there were no leg holes in the winter pelt. The Native American man informed them that he and some others had trapped and killed a wasset, and used its hide for making the canoe. It had no leg holes because it was the winter, and the wasset had already shed its stumpy legs. In order to trap one, a tribe needed to use dozens of logs falling in on all sides of the trap, hopefully pinning the animal under the snow. But the wasset is so slippery that the creature was rarely ever caught.
Thanks for watching! Be sure to stay tuned for extra content you might have missed.
Monkey in a lightning storm. A mysterious creature was recently spotted haunting the streets of Texas. A terrified eyewitness described it as a monkey, while another described it as a chimpanzee. Potato, potato. What all eyewitnesses agree on is that it looks like some kind of humanoid, and it has a bloodlust for pets. The unidentified creature is apparently lurking around, kidnapping cats and scaring children. Patricia de la Mora called the police in the early hours of the morning when she woke up in the middle of the night during a storm. Through the thunder and lightning, she heard strange noises outside, and when she got up to look out the window, she was paralyzed by fear. It was a monkey. Apparently, it was looking for something. She quickly closed her curtain so that the creature couldn't see her, then ran to her phone and called the police. But when they arrived, whatever it was had already gone. The following day, another woman phoned the police because she had gotten trapped in her car after a giant monkey tried to attack her. She was hiding in there for 20 minutes. But yet again, when the police arrived, the supposed monkey was long gone. Other residents have also reported spotting a monkey. One time it tried to kidnap their cat, and another person said a child was attacked. The police still haven't caught the humanoid beast roaming through Santa Fe, Texas. Some say that it must be that an actual monkey is on the loose. Maybe someone's former pet, or maybe escaped from the zoo. Whatever it is causing havoc. Perhaps it's Bigfoot's cousin. Kentucky creature. A mysterious creature has been discovered in Kentucky that looks almost like a mythical creature. The creature walked out of the forest and into Mark Cothran's front yard in the middle of the afternoon. It immediately frightened him because the creature didn't have any hair, and it was the middle of winter. He said, "I was like, every animal has hair, especially this time of year." So he says that he shot it because he didn't know what it was. After he killed the thing, he brought it up onto his porch to get a better look. The creature had huge ears, long teeth, extremely long whiskers, and looked almost like a house cat. While locals are convinced that Mark killed some kind of unidentified species, Sam Kleitz with the Louisville Zoo isn't so sure. Sam says that after seeing the photographs online, his first guess would be that the creature was a raccoon or a dog that had gotten sick and lost its fur. He says it's definitely not a mythical creature. Cothran gave it to the Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources so they can try to figure out what it is. The Goat Man. About 50 years ago, a photograph was taken at Lake Worth in Texas of a creature that would gain serious notoriety. Witnesses described seeing a creature that was half human and half goat. It allegedly stood at least 7 feet tall and weighed 350 pounds. It was hairy, covered in scales, and was seen by several different people sprinting through the fields. One guy managed to take a photo of it, though all the photo really shows is a white smudge in the shape of a person. The creature became known as the Goat Man, and it's been a terrible memory for the people of Lake Worth since 1969. Back when the Goat Man was first spotted, police were actually quite scared. A huge group of townsfolk got together in a crazed mob. They wanted to take matters into their own hands, meaning they wanted to find the creature and burn it to death. There were reports that people were driving around in trucks, chasing anything that moved. It was absolute pandemonium. But when all was said and done, the Goat Man was nowhere to be found. There are thousands of acres of woodland here, and the creature could have escaped and gone anywhere. Ever since 1969, nobody has seen the monster. Either these guys were drinking too much moonshine and mistook a deer for a monster from hell, or the Goat Man has gone back into hiding. Who knows when we'll see this beast again? Mysterious elf. A very strange elf-like creature has recently been captured on a home security system. Vivian Gomez caught what can only be described as an elf from a fairy tale wandering through her neighborhood in the middle of the night. She woke up on a Sunday morning and checked the surveillance footage from outside her house. What she saw made her almost spit out her breakfast. There was a small, skinny creature with thin legs, floppy ears like a hound, and it appeared to be naked. It was wandering down the driveway as if it was just headed out to get the mail. And oddly enough, only one of her surveillance cameras captured the footage of the monster. Her other two, while not malfunctioning at all, completely missed it. Naturally, a lot of people think this is a hoax, but according to Vivian Gomez, it's 100% real. After all, she says, why would I go through all the trouble of making up an elf in the middle of the night just to get a bit of attention? Well, a lot of people have done more for less, so that's not a great defense, but she claims the elf was definitely on her property, but that she has not seen it since. Maybe it was a prank. Speculation has run wild over what this creature could be. Obviously, it's not any kind of wild animal. It's clearly strolling around on 2 legs. It could be a neighborhood child, but it honestly doesn't look human. Some speculate that the creature is either Dobby the elf from Harry Potter doing a bit of midnight exploring, or an alien that came down from its ship and got lost. Since nobody has seen it since, there's no way to know for sure. What do you think it was? Let me know in the comments below. Monster in the coal mine. In the small town of Van Meter, Iowa, a winged visitor descended from parts unknown and terrorized the locals. It happened over a span of several weeks in 1903. A group of townsfolk, including respected members of the community, reported witnessing some kind of monster that was half human, half animal, and had enormous bat wings. The creature measured over 9 feet tall and gave off some pungent, terrible odor, and it moved extremely quickly. And according to one witness, it shot light out of a horn sticking out from its forehead. It is pretty unbelievable, but the story has been a part of Van Meter culture for over 100 years. According to the local legend, the townsfolk got together and tried to kill the monster, but every attempt failed. It seemed to be bulletproof. One day they found it accompanied by a smaller second visitor. It had brought another one. When they finally managed to corner it, The winged demon and its baby flew down the shaft of an old coal mine near the town and was never seen again. According to some, the monster is still hiding down there in the coal mine, hibernating until its next time to feed. But what could the animal have been? Was it perhaps some species of giant bat? It was so long ago, it's hard to say. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Lake Wylie Monster. The legend of the horrible snake that lives in the Catawba River of South Carolina has been around for centuries. However, some very recent proof in the form of a grainy photo could be the most recent evidence that this monster of legend really does exist. A woman was spending her weekend down at Sunset Point on Lake Wylie when out of nowhere what appeared to be the head of a giant river serpent stuck out from the lake. Behind the great head was a huge wake trailing back quite a length, suggesting the snake had a body at least 5 or 6 feet long. The woman who took the photo, Jessica Plate, didn't quite know what she was looking at. At first, she thought maybe it was a dog or a deer, or perhaps even a scuba diver. But as she watched the thing move through the water, it became clear that she was looking at some kind of marine predator. It couldn't have been an alligator, because no alligator moves like that underwater. The only thing that made sense was a serpent, a big, powerful serpent. And to make matters even more convincing, Jessica hadn't even been aware of the local legends of a huge river snake living there. She wasn't out looking for it. She just so happened to be the one to spot it. Like most unidentified monsters, there is no way to know for sure what this creature really was. It's true that the native people of the area have been telling tales of a river monster for centuries, something described as a giant leech or a monstrously large snake. But so far, Jessica's extremely blurry photo is the closest thing we have to physical proof. Extinct wolves. Rina Kambayashi opened the front door to her family's traditional wooden house in the Saitama Prefecture of Japan and got quite the shock. She was standing in her doorway, looking out at a lonely dog in the shrubs near her pond. They were only about 10 feet away from each other, but Rina was positive she had never seen this type of canine in her life. The animal stared for just a few seconds, then it was gone, vanished into the bamboo forest. Rina claims the dog had a long triangular snout, a uniquely flat face, a straight tail, and black and brown fur. It wasn't too big, though it did look very hungry, and many of its ribs were showing through its fur. She actually thought it looked more like a wolf, not actually a dog at all. As it turns out, she may have had a close encounter with an extinct species of wolf that hasn't been seen in Japan in over 100 years. In fact, it was in 1905 that Malcolm Anderson was sent to Japan to collect specimens for the London Zoological Society. He ended up purchasing the dead remains of the very last wolf ever captured in the country. Ever since then, Japanese wolves have been considered extinct. But there have been a few rare sightings. They started in the late 1990s and are still happening today. Perhaps this extinct species might still be around. As always, there is much debate, but zoological experts believe there could still be a very small population of wild wolves living in rural Japanese forests. Werewolf in the river. A pair of fishermen were out spending a relaxing afternoon down at their local river when they came across something very strange. Lying in the water at the edge of the river was what appeared to be the remains of a werewolf. As they got closer and closer to investigate, they saw that the huge form was lying in the shallow area with the water covering most of its face. But the creature's hairy chest and its huge deadly teeth gave the men quite a fright. The creature was a little larger than they were, although it was hard to really see what it might have been because of its state of decomposition. Of course, we don't know all the details to the story. We know that the fishermen took as many pictures as they could and then got out of there. But I don't think they brought in any type of expert up to their fishing spot to investigate. There are strange things that happen in the woods, and sometimes it's better not to stick around. After the fishermen posted the pictures online, people were quick to dismiss them as a hoax, since the most rational explanation is that it was most likely a dead bear. That's probably a good thing. We have a lot going on already without adding getting attacked by real werewolves to the mix. According to animal experts, a bear would be much more likely, especially since bears are known to live in the area. This would explain the patchy hair on its chest, as the rest of its hair had already fallen out. Plus, the teeth in its mouth are pretty similar to bear teeth. Either these guys found a giant, weirdly shaped bear in the river, or it is proof of the half-man, half-beast. The three-eyed snake. On the side of the highway in Australia, officers with the Northern Territory Parks and Wildlife Service discovered a snake with too many eyes for comfort. The slippery serpent was discovered with its 2 regular eyes and then a 3rd eye sticking out from its forehead like some kind of mythical monster. The officers nicknamed it Monty Python, since it was a carpet python. But unfortunately, the mutant snake died several weeks after it was discovered. It was apparently struggling to eat as a result of its mutation. According to what the officers told local news, they discovered the snake near the small town of Humpty Doo. It was having difficulty eating because of its deformity, so they took the snake with them. They were hoping to find a way to keep the snake alive, but this proved to be an impossible task. They took X-ray scans of the serpent to try and get to the bottom of its mutation and found that it didn't actually have 2 heads formed together, but rather a single skull with an additional eye socket and all 3 eyes fully functional. Professor Brian Fry says this type of mutation is a natural part of evolution and that it may have happened when the snake absorbed its twin inside its egg. While it didn't turn out very well this time, we could see additional 3-eyed snakes in the future. Maybe even in 10,000 years, there'll be a whole breed of mutant snakes with an extra 3rd eye. The Mississippi Monster. In Mississippi, a man from Simpson County recently encountered an animal that makes absolutely no sense. His name is Truett Barnard, and he's been hunting in the region for half a century. He is very familiar with the area as well as its wildlife, but when he made his most recent kill, he couldn't identify it for the life of him. It looked like some sort of wild dog. He says that he knew immediately that it wasn't a coyote, as he's seen many before. And to be honest, he was left scratching his head. All he could do was take a picture of the freakish creature and move on. The creature had back legs longer than its front legs, it didn't have a scrap of hair on it, and it had unusually long teeth, kind of like vampire teeth. Other people reported seeing a similar animal in the area. Truett also noticed that even after the creature was dead and left in the grass, the buzzards refused to go anywhere near it. He said this is pretty crazy considering there's basically nothing in the world that buzzards won't eat. The prevailing theory right now is that the creature was some type of chupacabra, the blood-sucking monster said to live throughout Puerto Rico, Mexico, and the southern United States. Ever since this one was killed, people in the area have started coming forward with claims that they too have seen similar creatures. What do you think? Poor, sick, mangy dog, or the chupacabra? Thanks for watching! What's the wildest creature sighting you've ever had? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. We have lots more videos coming up. See you later. Bye!